Who else here has gotten hooked on the series Severance on Apple TV? It's in its second year, and this show has the makings of becoming a cult classic akin to Twin Peaks or Lost. Severance is set in a fictional U.S. city and centers around the fictional biotechnical company Lumen Industries. The offices of Lumen are white and stark, lit with fluorescent lights and void of windows, and the hallways, they seem to go on forever. The employees are task-driven, held to high standards, rewarded when milestones are reached, and reprimanded when the corporate standards are violated. Clearly, a commentary on corporate North America, on the drive to perform and achieve. But the twist in the show? Employees have undergone severance, a procedure that means that while at work, they retain no memories of the outside world, and when they leave, they have no memory of life at their job. Basically, each employee has two distinct personalities. The innie, whose whole experience dwells within the walls of Lumen Industries, and the outie, who lives out personal life outside of work. Now, what I have found so interesting about this show is why the outies decide to undergo severance in the first place. Lack of direction and focus, the painful struggle of grief, pain of love withheld, deeply rooted shame. They want respite from the parts of their lives that are too hard, too painful. They hope that somehow their innie will be better, be different, experience less hurt. Either way, it's an escape from the parts of themselves that they don't want to face, and the belief that severance is their best option. They lock away parts of themselves and they throw away the key, an attempt to permanently compartmentalize the difficult parts of life. So while certainly a commentary on corporate North America, severance also speaks to our culture's desire to avoid pain and discomfort at any cost. Thing is, this is impossible. It's part of the human experience. Lord knows we try our best to convince ourselves otherwise, drowning it out with booze and drugs, covering it up by buying more stuff than we could ever truly need, steering clear of it by keeping ourselves so busy we don't have time for anything else, avoiding it with toxic positivity, hiding away however we think we can. But friends, I can tell you firsthand it doesn't work. And it's not necessary. Because today we are met by the resurrected Jesus, who shows up to fearful disciples cooped up behind a locked door and shows them and us that there is no part of who we are or what we've experienced that he won't enter into with us. If you had shown up in that locked room and surveyed the disciples, asking them if they'd like to sign up for severance, a way to escape what they were experiencing, I can imagine them asking where to sign. the amount of pain and grief that they would have been experiencing after watching their best friend and teacher be killed would have been excruciating. Not only that, but Judas, one of their own, had sold Jesus out, handing him over for 30 pieces of silver. And then there's Peter. The shame of having denied even knowing Jesus just hours before his death. Add to that the fear of they themselves being rounded up by the authorities and the confusion of finding out that the tomb where Jesus was buried is empty. This is trauma. And it's into all of this that the risen Jesus shows up, complete with the marks of the wounds of his crucifixion. Now, the marks of Jesus' wounds, they certainly would have allowed his disciples to physically identify him as their friend and teacher, the one who was beaten, nailed to a cross and pierced in his side. But in this resurrection encounter, the marks of Jesus' wounds also serve as a recognition of the depth of pain that Jesus himself has experienced, and act as an acknowledgement of the disciples' fear, pain, shame, and confusion. And into all of this, Jesus speaks the words, "Peace be with you." Now, he isn't negating their very real fear or experiences, nor is he reprimanding them for being behind a locked door. He shows up exactly where they're at, declares his peace, and shows them his wounds. Resurrection doesn't magically erase fear and pain, but a resurrected Jesus who maintains his wounds does show us that we aren't alone, that God is willing to meet us in the hurting, and that there is a way through it, even if it's far from clear in the moment. Which is good news and can leave us feeling vulnerable, because this means that all of who we are, all of our life, even the parts we try to keep locked away from ourselves and others, they're important to Jesus. Nothing deemed insignificant. We try to pick and choose where we'll let Jesus in, turning our lives into an elaborate multiple choice test. I'll open door A, or door B, or door C. But the option Jesus seeks is D, all of the above. Yet to check all of the above is to acknowledge the parts we'd rather avoid, the things that seem too dark, too difficult for us to handle, the things that perhaps we'd like to sever from who we are. Might we hear the risen, wounded Christ saying to us, "Peace be with you, beloved one. See these wounds on my body? Darling, I know the pain you're in, and I am here with you. You are not alone, and even though it hurts like hell, I'll walk with you into new life." Might this have been what the disciples heard in their hearts as Jesus breathed onto every part of their being, the fear, the trauma, the confusion, the very breath of the Holy Spirit? And when we doubt this to be true, which, let's face it, we likely have or will at some point, Jesus remains persistent in his desire to be with us. Remember, Jesus shows up not once, but twice in our gospel reading this morning. Thomas, one of the disciples, wasn't with the others when Jesus showed up. And when Thomas returns, his friends, they tell him that they have seen Jesus. Only instead of nodding in awe-inspired agreement, Thomas makes a declaration. Unless he sees what the others saw, unless he verifies this for himself, he will not believe. I wonder, is this Thomas's way of circumventing disappointment? If Jesus has in fact shown up, why aren't things different? Why aren't things better? Well, there has been a shift in the hearts of Jesus' friends, a glimmer of hope and some rejoicing after their encounter with Jesus. Life hasn't turned into a party overnight. They remain behind closed door. Threat is still close at hand. They are still confused about what this means for them and are now living in the tension of hope and struggle. Maybe Thomas just thought it seemed safer not to believe. But Jesus shows up. And as though having heard Thomas, invites him to witness his wounded body, to put his hand in his side. And with all the challenges and confusion still in play, Thomas responds, "My Lord and my God." A proclamation of who this risen, wounded Jesus is. My friends, the one we are learning to follow here today is Jesus Christ, the one who rose from the dead, showed us his hands and his side, and reveals to us that our pain, hurt, and woundedness does not render us less than whole in the eyes of God. May we have the courage to show all of who we are to the one whose love goes on forever. And know that even when, or perhaps especially when, we feel like there's nowhere else to turn, when all we want to do is sever ourselves from our pain, we are never truly alone. We are an Easter people, embraced by resurrection love.